Yo, what's good, YouTube? Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another reaction video. We got the rise, fall, and resurgence of Baker Mayfield. Let's check this out.
That knows a lot about the highs and
hey, I'm so happy for him, though, bro.
In the NFL,
you know what I'm saying? Because he's in a part of a organization that actually cares and shit like that. Actual good organization, because you know what I'm saying, he was drafted by the Browns, so we know how bad of an organization they are by giving Deshaun Watson $230 million guaranteed, and then with the Panthers and shit like that. And then the Rams, they were a good one, but they only kept him for a year. But the Bucks are a perfect spot for him to showcase his talent and shit like that. So I'm very happy for Baker Mayfield, bro.
Baker was a walk-on and transferred all before winning the Heisman Trophy. He was the first overall pick and helped a struggling organization make the playoffs and even win a postseason game. Baker Mayfield was a top name in the game, and he had a bright future. But then he was replaced and sent to the depths of hell, Carolina.
Yep.
He struggled with a
they
bad
did
team,
Baker
but
dirty,
found some
bro.
success after being released to earn a one-year prove-it deal with Tampa Bay, where he did just that, proved it. Baker Mayfield has had his ups and downs. He started from the bottom and rose to the top just to fall back down and have to restart all over again. But he stayed resilient. His story is nothing short of incredible. Baker Mayfield was born on April 14th, 1995 in Austin, Texas. His middle name is actually Reagan, named after Ronald Reagan, thanks to his father James Mayfield, who played football at Houston for 3 years. Baker played at Lake Travis High School and went 25-2 in 2 seasons and won the 2011 4A state championship. In all, Baker Mayfield had 6,255 yards, 67 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions over his high school career. He wasn't a very sought-after recruit, though. He was a 3-star and the composite 42nd best quarterback in the class. 1 spot ahead of Kurt Benkert, 27 spots behind Jared Goff, 32 spots behind Josh Dobbs, and 41 spots behind the top quarterback in the class, Max Brown.
Who the hell is Max Brown?
Florida Atlantic, New Mexico, and Rice, but instead decided to go to Texas Tech as a preferred walk-on. 2013 was the first season for Texas Tech with Cliff Kingsbury at head coach. Michael Brewer was the expected starter, but then suffered a back injury, and suddenly, Baker Mayfield was the first walk-on true freshman quarterback to start an FBS season opener. He put on a show in his first 2 starts, securing wins over SMU and Stephen F. Austin. Baker completed 71.1% of his passes for 780 yards and 7 touchdowns, plus 1 rushing, without an interception. It was an incredible start to his collegiate career, but it didn't last. He struggled the next week against TCU with 216 yards, 1 touchdown, and 3 interceptions.
Damn, 3 picks is crazy.
Texas Tech did ultimately win.
How the hell did he win that game?
Marquez touchdown, but it wasn't Baker Mayfield who threw it. It was actually true freshman 4-star Davis Webb who alternated between starting and backing up Baker in 2013. Baker did then have 4 touchdowns and an interception in a 63-34 blowout loss to number 5 Baylor at AT&T Stadium. Baker Mayfield appeared in 8 games and won Big 12 Offensive Freshman of the Year after he passed for 2,315 yards, 12 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions, plus 3 rushing touchdowns. The future was looking bright for the true freshman, but then he transferred. Baker said Texas Tech had not offered him a scholarship for the spring semester and decided to transfer to Oklahoma to play for Bob Stoops. The NCAA rule at the time was that a player who transfers and hasn't graduated has to sit out for a year. But the Big 12 had a rule that if a player transfers within the conference, they lose a year of eligibility and have to sit out. The loss of eligibility could be waived by the player's former school, but Texas Tech denied Baker's request.
Of course they did.
The Big 12 did later change its rule to let some walk-ons transfer within the conference without losing eligibility, a rule that Texas Tech actually voted in favor for, and it allowed Baker to play in 2017, the year he won the Heisman Trophy. After sitting out of the 2014 season, Baker Mayfield won the Oklahoma starting quarterback job over Trevor Knight. In his OU debut against Akron, Baker passed for 388 yards and 3 touchdowns and rushed for another. He passed for 13 touchdowns over his first 4 games as a Sooner, leading up to a huge game against Texas. Baker had a single touchdown, and Oklahoma lost its first and only game of the regular season. They followed it up though with an an absolute
55
smashing of
nothing.
Kansas State,
God,
winning 55-0 as Baker threw 5 touchdowns in his best performance of the season. He got his revenge on Texas Tech the next week.
That's gotta feel good for Baker.
Led Red Raiders 63-20 on Texas Tech the next week, beating the Patrick Mahomes-led Red Raiders 63-27, and OU won the Bedlam game 58-23. At the time, Oklahoma State was number 11 in the country. Oklahoma went on to make the college football playoff as the number 4 seed, but ended up losing to number 1 seed Clemson 37-17 as Baker struggled. He passed for just a touchdown to 2 interceptions. Still, it was a successful season for the Sooners and Baker Mayfield. He had 3,700 yards, 36 touchdowns, plus 7 rushing touchdowns, and 7 interceptions, and finished 4th in Heisman Trophy voting. Again in 2016, Baker was a finalist for the Heisman Trophy, and so was his top receiver, D.D. Westbrook. He was just one of many good offensive weapons that Baker got to play with.
D.D. Westbrook was a bust.
Sterling Shepard, CeeDee Lamb, Marquise Brown, Mark Andrews,
Money
Samaje
Man
Perine,
Mark,
and Joe Mixon. He also had some pretty great offensive linemen like Orlando Brown Jr., Cody Ford, Ben Powers, and Creed Humphrey. Of course, there's always his backup
Orlando Brown,
Kyler
former
Murray.
Ravens too.
Safe to say that Baker had some talent around him, but OU still missed the CFP for the first and only time behind Mayfield in 2016 after they started the season 1-2. They dropped games to number 15 Houston and number 3 Ohio State by a combined 31 points. Baker was playing well regardless though, and OU didn't lose another game that season, including a Sugar Bowl win against Auburn. Baker had 7 games with 3 or more touchdowns, including that iconic Baker had 7 games.
Baker out here bullying motherfuckers. Nigga said, "Get off me."
66-59 win over Texas Tech.
You like
the Sooners
those?
and Red Raiders combined for a Division I record 1,708 yards. Baker
I remember this game.
Mahomes combined for 1,279 passing yards and 12 touchdowns. That was easily the best game of Baker's college career, and it helped him put together a good statistical season with 3,965 yards, 40 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, and 6 rushing touchdowns. After the season, Baker got into some trouble after he was arrested in Arkansas on charges of public intoxication. Disorderly conduct and fleeing and resisting arrest. He ended up having to do
that officer did not hold back whatsoever.
Education program. He then had
damn near killed Baker
backlash in his final season at Oklahoma after Baker Mayfield planted the OU flag in the middle of the O at Ohio Stadium, and later in another game grabbed his crotch saying "you" to the Kansas sideline.
Nick Bosa got his get back for that flag thing,
but that didn't derail his Heisman campaign. The best year Baker Mayfield had in college was absolutely in 2017, and it came after Bob Stoops retired and Lincoln Riley was promoted from offensive coordinator to head coach. Baker went on a tear. He had multiple touchdowns in every game, including a season-high 5 touchdowns and the only game he threw multiple interceptions, Bedlam. Baker had his school-high 598 yards, and OU won 62-52. Oklahoma dropped just a single game in the regular season in 2017, a 38-31 loss at home against Iowa State. Alan Lazard actually scored the game-winning touchdown, and David Montgomery scored in the Cyclones' win too. Other than that, OU ran the Big 12. They played TCU in the conference championship game, whose top receiver at the time was actually Jalen Reagor. Oklahoma won 41-17 and earned the number 2 seed in the college football playoff, where they'd have to face off against Georgia. Georgia, led by running backs Nick Chubb and Sony Michel, while DeAndre Swift was 3, won 54-48 in what was Baker Mayfield's last game of his collegiate career. Baker finished with an incredible year, passing for 4,627 yards, 43 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions, plus 5 rushing touchdowns. He went on to win the Heisman Trophy, becoming the first walk-on player to ever do so. But up next came the draft. There were some good quarterback prospects in the 2018 NFL Draft, including Sam Darnold, Josh Allen, Josh Rosen, and Lamar Jackson. The question was, who was going to go number 1? The Browns had the first overall pick at the 2018 NFL Draft after another disastrous season. Cleveland went 0-16, and that came right after a 1-15 finish in 2016.
Winning only one game in the fucking last 2 seasons is crazy work. That is nasty.
and Baker was drafted to
bro.
hopefully be their savior. In March of 2018, the Browns decided to trade for Tyrod Taylor from the Bills. Cleveland went on to decide that he was going to be the Week 1 starter, and immediately he helped them snap a 17-game losing streak. But they still didn't win. They ended up tying with the Steelers. 2 weeks later, finally the Browns won a game for the first time since 2016, but it came with plenty of drama. Tyrod Taylor went down with an injury, and Baker took the field down 14-0. He went on to throw for 201 yards, and Cleveland came back to win 21-17 to end a 19-game winless streak.
But hold on, so you're telling me the Jets only scored 3 points for the rest of the game?
He went on to throw for 201 yards, and Cleveland came back to win 21-17 to end a 19-game winless streak. From that point on, he was the starter, and he led the Browns to their best record since 2007, 7-8-1. His first NFL start was a 45-42 overtime loss to the Raiders, but Baker then went on to win his first career start the following week, 12-9 in overtime over the Ravens. The best stretch of his rookie year came from Week 7 to Week 12, with a Week 11 bye along the way. Over the span, the Browns went 2-3 as Baker passed for 1,166 yards, 13 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. Unfortunately, he'd have the worst game of the season in a loss to the Texans, where he had just a single touchdown to 3 interceptions. It was one of 2 free interception games for him in 2018, including in Week 17 in a loss to Baltimore, which was his second back-to-back 3-touchdown game. Baker finished the year with 3,725 yards, 27 touchdowns, which was the most by a rookie in NFL history at the time, and 14
until
interceptions.
Herbert broke that.
It was a promising rookie season, but it came with its drama. Hugh Jackson was the Browns head coach to start the season before he was fired after a 2-5-1 start. He finished his time as the Browns head coach with a 3-36-1 record. It really can't get much worse than that. Former Bills head coach Greg Williams took over as the interim. Along with Hugh Jackson getting fired, so was offensive coordinator Todd Haley, which led to familiar name Freddie Kitchens getting promoted to his position as OC. Freddie Kitchens got a lot of credit for Baker Mayfield's good rookie season, and it led to him getting promoted to head coach ahead of the 2019 season. Safe to say, that didn't go too well. The Browns somehow actually got worse, and Kitchens was fired a few hours after the last game of the season. It was a less than ideal season for Baker
They didn't waste any
time,
time,
There were some pretty big expectations heading into the year, especially after the Browns traded for OBJ from the Giants to
this is when OBJ's career got ruined right here. After this trade, bro. I mean, he was good for the Rams in their Super Bowl run, but this right here, this trade really ruined his career.
Jarvis Landry. Odell did have a 1,000-yard season, which likely is the last of his career, but Baker had a bad sophomore slump. He didn't have a multiple passing touchdown game until Week 10 and had 3 different games with 3 interceptions, including a 43-13 blowout against the Titans to start the year. His best game of the season came in Week 12 versus the Dolphins. He had 327 yards, 3 touchdowns, which was one of his 2 3-touchdown games of the season, in a 41-24 win. Overall, it was a pretty disappointing season for both Baker and the Browns. They lost 4 straight at one point and closed the season with a 3-game losing streak to go 6-10. Baker finished the year with 3,827 yards, 22 touchdowns, and 21 interceptions.
Golly, 21 interceptions
was not the answer, and that's when Cleveland hired.
Bro, how the hell do you even throw that many?
At the time, the Browns had only made the playoffs once in 2002 since their return to the NFL, and they hadn't been back since. That was until 2020. Year 1 under Stefanski got up to a pretty rocky start with a 38-6 blowout loss to the Ravens, but Cleveland responded with a 4-game win streak, and Baker threw 2 touchdowns in each game. In Week 7, he had a career-high 5 touchdowns to go with 297 yards and an interception, and a tight 37-34 win against the Bengals. 5 games later, he had 334 yards, 4 touchdowns, and no interceptions, and a close 41-35 victory over the Titans.
That 2020 season was weird, bro, with no fans.
He passed for 3,563 yards, 26 touchdowns, and only 8 interceptions. But more importantly than any of that, the Browns went 11-5 and made the playoffs. They had to go on the road in the wild card round to Pittsburgh and got a 48-37 win after jumping out to a 28-0 lead in the first quarter.
This score didn't really, you know what I'm saying? I wouldn't call this a blowout. It's a 9-point game, But bro, this does not let you know how fucking crazy that game was with Cleveland really blowing out Pittsburgh.
48-37 win after jumping out to a 28-0 lead in the first quarter.
Because they were fucking them up.
Throwing for 263 yards and 3 touchdowns without a pick. The next week, the Browns actually gave the Chiefs a pretty good test, but did lose 22-17.
Mahomes got hurt this game.
It felt like Cleveland was finally on the cusp of being a true contender, and Baker Mayfield was a big part of that. They picked up his 5th-year option ahead of the 2021 season, and that's when things went south. In week 2, Baker suffered a partially torn labrum, and he just kept getting worse. He re-aggravated it in week 6, and later suffered a knee contusion in week 10. He was beat up all season long, and his play just wasn't good. He didn't have over 2 touchdowns in any game and had a brutal 4-interception loss to the Packers. Baker Mayfield had easily the worst season during his time in Cleveland, passing for 3,010 yards, 17 touchdowns, and 13 interceptions. The Browns went 6-8 in his starts and 8-9 overall. After the season, Cleveland traded for Deshaun Watson from the Texans.
Yeah, they did Baker dirty with that, bro.
So the Browns traded away Baker Mayfield to the Panthers for a conditional 5th-round pick. Baker spent the 2022 offseason competing with Sam Darnold for the Carolina starting job. Baker did ultimately win the gig and started the Panthers' first 5 games of the season before suffering a high ankle sprain that caused him to miss some time. He came in for a struggling PJ Walker in week 9 and then struggled in week 11, a 13-3 loss where Baker had 2 interceptions. That was Baker's final appearance in Carolina. He finished his time with the Panthers 1-5 with 1,313 yards, 6 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions. He requested to be released and was claimed off of waivers by the Rams. With only 2 days to learn the playbook, Baker Mayfield backed up John
he won the
Wolford
game
in week 14 against the Raiders. Sean McVay then benched Wolford after 1 series and put Baker in. The Rams were down 16-3 in the 4th quarter, but then game-winning drive magic happened. With 1:45 left and no timeouts, Baker Mayfield led the Rams on a 98-yard
like this showed you how good Baker was, bro.
With a 23-yard Van Jefferson catch to win 17-16. Baker Mayfield went on to start the final 4 games of the season for the Rams, but won just one of them, a 51-14 win over the Broncos, a game where Baker was honored by winning Nickelodeon's prestigious MVP after throwing for 230 yards and 2 touchdowns. He finished his very brief time in Los Angeles with 850 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. Baker Mayfield went on to sign a 1-year deal with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the 2023 offseason, filling the void that Tom Brady left after retiring. Tampa Bay did have a quarterback competition
betted on himself,
between Baker and Kyle
and it paid off.
In the offseason. That Baker
had a great year with 4,000
A
yards.
lot of people counted out Baker.
How many touchdowns did he have?
He certainly had like a big comeback year in 2023. His best game was in Week 14, a 34-20 win over the Packers. Baker had 381 yards and 4 touchdowns without a single interception. It was one of the 2, 3 or more passing touchdown games he had on the year, and he only threw more than 1 interception a single time. He finished the year with 4,044 yards, 28 touchdowns, and 10 interceptions.
That's a pretty good touchdown to interception ratio.
Meanwhile, the Buccaneers won the NFC South for the 3rd straight year with a 9-0 Week 18 win over the Panthers. In the wildcard round, Baker won his 2nd career postseason game with a win over the Eagles. And like the time before, Baker had 3 touchdowns without an interception. The following week, he had 3 touchdowns and 2 interceptions and a 31-23 loss to the Lions. The Buccaneers and Baker Mayfield exceeded all expectations, and a lot of that has to do with offensive coordinator Dave Canales, who was just recently hired by the Panthers to be their head coach. Now it's time to see just how well new offensive coordinator Liam Cohen can mesh with Baker Mayfield. He had success at Kentucky as the OC, and most recently spent some time with the Rams as their OC. Regardless, Baker Mayfield is now locked up. He got a 3-year extension in the offseason worth up to $100 million.
Very well deserved, bro. I'm just so happy to see him win,
He's
bro.
earned every dime of it.
Baker
has had a crazy up and down career, but he keeps ending up back on top. And here we are again. He's a starting quarterback in the NFL, and he finally got a big bag to do so.
Hey man, what do you guys think? Y'all let me know down in the comments below. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. You guys like, comment, subscribe to the channel if you're new. Turn on post notifications, notify whenever I drop another banger video. We're on the road to 300 subs. Help me get there for more banger NFL content like this. So without further ado, I'm out. Gang!